When physics outplayed electronic warfare. How $8,000 in hobby drones incinerated. 840 tons of Russian fuel at 0347 on June 22, 2025. A Russian locomotive engineer stood beside his train under a pale pre-dawn sky, methodically checking gauges and cross-referencing departure times. The air was cool and still, only the hum of the diesel engine breaking the silence. What he didn't know was that for 73 minutes, Ukrainian intelligence had been watching every twist of metal and every flicker of heat from 35 kilometers away. In less than 2 minutes, 840 tons of diesel would erupt into a spectacle of fire and metal, all orchestrated by a handful of $8,000 hobby drones retrofitted into precision-guided missiles. Inside a camouflaged van hidden in a nearby hollow, members of elite Kabul 9 sat hunched over screens, finger poised above encrypted comms. Thermal cameras painted the train in ghostly hues, white-hot engines, simmering steel cars, and dark shadows where nothing stirred. They saw nuances no human eye could catch, a slight uptick in temperature along a weld seam, or the faint glow betraying nearly full tanks of premium diesel. Every pixel brimmed with significance. For 4 days, a network of partisan spotters had tracked this particular supply run, passing intel through encrypted smartphones like a secret baton. They mapped the Rostovan depot's departure schedule, calculated the train's speed, and pinpointed a 20-minute window where Russian air defenses couldn't reach. They crunched the numbers. 12 cars carrying 70 tons each equaled 840 tons, enough fuel to power 3 armored battalions for 10 days. In a war of inches, those days could make the difference between a breakthrough and a grinding stalemate. At the van's rear, engineers prepared their weapon of choice. Modified DJI Mavic drones no longer content with hobby-grade performance. Firmware hacks unleashed 56.6 digital zoom, while custom RF circuits skipped frequencies 1,500 times a second across multiple bands. Batteries bulged beneath reinforced frames, granting 45 minutes of loiter time. And strapped beneath each quadcopter was a copper-lined PG-7VL-shaped charge, 2.6 kilograms of warhead designed to punch through half a meter of armor. Together, the package was a foldable missile, silent until the instant it struck. As dawn's first light crept into the sky, the drones lifted off in perfect silence, their rotors whispering overhead. Starlink relays fed live thermal imagery back to operators who watched the train inch forward at 45 kilometers per hour. Then came the signal. Engage in T-minus 60 seconds. On the Russian side, a Lear 3 electronic warfare truck idled nearby, its jammers dormant. Unaware they were minutes away from a test they would fail. At 0348, the world's most expensive jammer woke with a roar, spewing broadband noise across a 30-kilometer radius in a hailstorm of electrons. It aimed to drown civilian communications and drone controls in static. When that didn't work, the crew switched to spot jamming on 2.4 and 5.8 gigahertz, the typical frequencies of commercial drones. But Kabul 9 had expected this gambit. Their frequency-hopping drones flitted through the noise like fireflies dancing between raindrops, untouched by the cacophony. Next came the Lear 3's GPS spoofing, false satellite signals intended to reroute the drones to the Pacific. But inside each craft, solid-state gyros and inertial measurement units, unfazed by satellite trickery, tracked every turn and every velocity change. Newton's laws held sway where electronics failed. The drones locked their sights on the train with mathematical precision. Silently and invisibly, the lead drone unspooled a fiber optic tether thinner than a human hair. Over that 9-micron line streamed uncompressed 1080p video, control commands, telemetry, and GPS corrections, immune to jamming because light cannot be drowned by radio. The physical lifeline added weight and demanded larger frames, but it guaranteed battlefield immunity. With a faint thud, the drone impacted fuel car number 4. In an instant, the PG-7VL charge vaporized a neat hole through 15 millimeters of steel at 12,800 degrees C. 70 tons of diesel flash vaporized, igniting into a colossal fireball that bloomed across the morning horizon. The ground shook. Windows rattled in villages 20 kilometers away. Amid the roar, Russian crew members fumbled with AK-74s, spraying 5.45 mm rounds skyward in frantic disbelief. A hummingbird's wing would have presented a bigger target. Under a storm of tracers, pilots executed hairpin maneuvers, their fiber optic feeds unwavering. When the first warhead only partially detonated and left Car 4 wounded rather than annihilated, one operator did something both brilliant and reckless. He guided the flaming wreckage into the leaking diesel, turning his own drone into a guided incendiary. The inferno birthed its own hurricane. Thermal convection currents ripped upward, generating 60 km/h winds that buffet the remaining drones. The second drone's fiber line snagged on a signal post, turning its approach into a tethered dance. With the cable tightening by the second, the pilot faced a brutal choice: abort or push through. He chose to press on, guiding his craft through twisting winds toward Car 8. Seconds later, the third drone plunged into Car 11, its shaped charge detonating in perfect sync with the second strike. The overlapping pressure waves amplified each other, feeding a sustained explosion that turned 3 cars into a single furnace. Temperatures soared past 1,000 degrees, steel rails warped into molten sculptures, and the trackbed melted beneath the blaze. Smoke and vaporized fuel clogged the air, scattering laser designators and confounding infrared sensors. Pilots flew blind, relying only on thermal contrasts and split-second instincts to thread their way through a firestorm they had created. Behind them, the LER-3's jamming had lapsed into impotent fury, its thousands of watts wasted against proof-of-concept physics. With 8% battery life remaining, the fourth drone roared toward the locomotive. No margin for error remained. A miss would leave $2.4 million of rolling stock intact. A strike would rend the engine block like paper. At 0350, it found its mark. The PG-7VL warhead punched through the engine block, ending the train's life in a single brutal moment. By sunrise, the battlefield lay silent save for the hiss of escaping steam. In under 3 minutes, $8,000 of repurposed drones had destroyed $2.4 million in metal, vaporized $600,000 of fuel, and halted 3 weeks of Russian armored operations. The operation's 30,000% return on investment wasn't a hedge fund's fantasy. It was a masterclass in cost-effective warfare. Villagers walking the tracks the next morning found scorched ballast, twisted rails, and the remnants of fiber optic strands glinting in the dawn light. No propaganda could erase the scarred landscape. No amount of jamming could rewrite the laws of physics. Ukraine had demonstrated that innovation and ingenuity could outpace raw expenditure every time. In the months that followed, militaries on both sides re-examined the implications. Low-cost drones with tethered lifelines became priorities. Electronic warfare units scrambled for countermeasures. Somewhere in a bunker, a Russian general stared at charts showing 10 days of fuel vanished in 94 seconds. Wondering how the war had changed so profoundly. This single episode revealed a stark truth. In modern conflict, the deadliest weapon may not be the biggest missile launcher or the most powerful jammer, but the cleverest mind and the simplest application of physical laws. As the sun climbed fully over Ukraine's scarred rails, one thing was clear. Tomorrow's battlefield would belong to those who could bend nature itself to their will. If you're intrigued by how stealthy tethers, inertial guidance, and low-cost aviation are reshaping warfare, stay tuned.